When you're ready. We all ready? Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to recognize here this morning political leader of the United Workers' Party, Honorable Alan Michael Shastney. I also want to recognize our Senator, the Honorable Dominic Fede, and of course to you, the media, and ladies and gentlemen in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen also who are viewing online, both home in St. Lucia here and abroad. This morning we are here to present the facts. This morning we are here to say to you as a country, we are in deep trouble. This morning we are here to present to you the information that we have with respect to where the United Workers' Party has taken this country and the benefits that have been derived, from this country. So the results you will hear this morning is the results of the work that the United Workers' Party has done. And that's important because when you hear your country is looking to borrow $1.8 billion, the largest rate of borrowing in the history of this country, it is worrisome. It is worrisome because from what we see, the signs in terms of the capability and ability of the government to deliver is troublesome. And so without any further ado, I would like to call on the Honorable Alan Michael Shastney, who would present to you the facts and the reality in terms of where we are as a country this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. First of all, before I begin, let me thank God for His continued blessings upon all of us. I also want to give a special recognition to our new Archbishop in St. Lucia. He's no stranger to St. Lucia because he is a son of the soil. And yesterday, I got to enjoy his first session in his hometown of Monrepo. So again, spirituality is a very, very important component to the development of any country. And I'm very much looking forward to working with him. But more importantly, I think that we're very blessed in our country to have an archbishop from our country at this very difficult time. This morning's session is being called upon because we obtained a copy of the Social and Economic Review, which is a main document that's provided on an annual basis that gives a recap of the performance of the economy for the previous year and gives us the ability to see that performance in comparison to previous years. Not only as a macro number, a GDP number, but also broken down between expenditures and revenues. And we felt compelled to call a press conference this morning because of how substantive the report is and the information that is contained in the report. The report shows very favorably that the country of St. Lucia grew by 12.2%. Now, you'll remember that the CDB had made a pronouncement a couple of months earlier, a projection that the economy would have grown by 6.7%. And that was obviously a projection based on what was thought was going to happen and some of the results that they'd had up until then. So it was simply a projection. The 12.2% is still a projection, but the reality is we don't see much variation as time goes by from this particular number. This is a very incredible number when you put it in comparison to other parts of the Caribbean. So the country in the Caribbean that grew the fastest was Guyana, which was by 19%. And as you know, Guyana doesn't have any tourism. Guyana is mainly an export commodities, and now with the discovery of oil and the levels of investment that was taking there, that was clearly projected. And certainly Guyana was not affected other than from a health perspective by COVID. Their economy did not contract. In fact, their economy continues to grow. So of the remaining countries, St. Lucia by far has the fastest growth rate. I think that the closest country to St. Lucia was Dominica at 6%. And so that's a remarkable story in itself. But why we're here today is to understand how we achieved that 12.2%. United Workers' Party, when we came into office, inherited a country that had successive years of negative economic growth, an economy that was struggling to borrow money, even at the point of getting treasury bills, which normally would be the easiest forms of monies to be able to borrow, with a staggering 25% unemployment. And in 3 short years, we, through our policies, were able to reverse that trend. So we now saw a significant reduction in the deficits. The borrowings had come back to St. Lucia, and very importantly, unemployment rate had dropped from 25% to 16.2%. Pretty remarkable. And the country was actually very poised for a significant takeoff. We had finalized the contracts for the HIA airport. We were well on the way to get St. Jude's Hospital started. The monies from the British, the grant funds, had been reallocated to do the West Coast Road. And we saw a number of private sector entities ready to start construction in St. Lucia. Sadly, one of those projects was the Sandals project that was next to the Sandals grant. And unfortunately, the Landings decided to sue the government in order to prevent the project from proceeding. And given the size of the project, which was in excess of $300 million, even though the lawsuit was not against Sandals, Sandoz decided to put the project on hold. And this is, again, great evidence that, when the kettle is hot, that's when you have to strike. You never know what tomorrow is going to bring. And as a result of it, we did not benefit from that significant investment. But when COVID came, and I want to say, because sometimes we forget how far-reaching the impact of COVID was. In April of 2020 until June of 2020, there was 0 tourism arrivals in St. Lucia. 0. So that means all of the hotels sent their staff home. All the persons who provided services to the hotels, there was no money coming in. So whether I had a bus and I was transporting staff, whether I was a farmer supplying products, whether I was a justice of the peace doing weddings, whether I was a caterer, whether I was selling flowers, the impact was not just on the hotel itself, but through the length and breadth of our economy. And the United Workers' Party, we identified those problems from early and had really started to work with the Banking Association as early as January of 2020. So even before the shutdown, we were anticipating that would happen. And we had worked with the banks to establish a moratorium. We were working with the World Bank and the IMF and CDB in accessing concessional funds to be able to help with our budgetary support. Now, normally, those entities would not give you monies for budgetary support. They only give you monies for capital projects. But given the extreme shock that we were feeling, not only in St. Lucia but globally, we were able to get those concessionary funds. We also knew and felt that it would take a while for tourism to recover. This wasn't going to be something where we were shut down for 3 months and all of a sudden COVID was going to be cured and then all of a sudden we would resume business as usual. The reality is that none of us knew. And if you remember, in April of 2020, I made an announcement that St. Lucia would have to coexist with COVID. Meaning we had to accept that COVID was there, but we could not afford to keep the economy shut down. And we would have to find a responsible way of reopening our borders. You'll also remember and recall that the then opposition seriously and heavily criticized my government for those actions. They went to the extreme of saying that anybody who died, that this would be blood on our hands. That's the extremity of the criticism that was leveled at my administration for daring to open up the borders. We also, as a plan, said that because tourism is not going to recover immediately, we had to find something that we felt that could substitute for tourism to be able to make up the shortfall of the revenues and jobs that we had lost in tourism. And the sector that we felt that we could mobilize the fastest would have been construction. Now, we already had several projects in the pipeline, and so what we said is that we would fast-track shovel-ready projects. So at this point, I really want to specifically highlight the work that the Minister Guy Joseph did. I know that he has been under several severe criticism, mainly originating from the Labour Party. But I think in time, people will see Guy Joseph in a very different light. What Guy Joseph accomplished is nothing short of a miracle. The monies that Guy Joseph was able to access is what we call DVRP. This was monies that were allocated to St. Lucia by the World Bank after Thomas, 2011. And when we came into government, over $77 million US of money that had been allocated was about to be lost. And Guy Joseph, even before COVID, was able to start implementing those projects and drawing down on those revenues. When COVID came, very similarly to what he did when he was the Minister of Infrastructure in Thomas, he was able to work with the World Bank and indicate to them, look, we're not going to be able to get international construction companies to come into St. Lucia. And more importantly, the government's policy is to try to use construction as a major economic stimulus to help with the unemployment situation and with government revenues. And as such, he was able to convince them to downsize the number of projects that we had, meaning if you had a large construction project like building drains, is to subdivide it into smaller contracts and to reduce the level of the bidding in order to allow solutions to be able to access those monies. Because prior to that, it was very difficult for solution companies by themselves to access those funds. And that program was incredibly successful. We saw the development of drains, and more importantly, we saw development of school wings. In Miku Secondary is a good example. What we saw taking place, PI Bridge. We see the community centers that were being done in Denry and in Miku and all throughout the length and breadth of this country. Those projects were being funded through the DVRP. So that means that those were monies that were already there, that the government had had difficulty in accessing, and he was able to negotiate in a very short period of time to change the conditions to be able to draw down on those monies. In addition to that, we found out that given the loan arrangement that we had with the Taiwanese, which was a 20-year loan with a 5-year moratorium, that we were going to use the 5-year space to create direct finance awards. And so $150 million worth of direct finance awards were identified. 3 companies that were able to go out and raise the monies, that's a very important part, $50 million each. So Fresh Start, Nationwide, and CIE, Reno Gajardo, were the 3 companies. And they worked through the Ministry of Infrastructure, who identified the road projects and provided all the supervision on the implementation of those projects. The direct award does not in any way curtail the oversight of those projects, but what it certainly did is help expedite the implementation of those projects. And as you would know, because of COVID, getting those projects off the ground as fast as possible was important. We pushed with CDB on the dam. We pushed with CDB on the water projects. And every single area where we had projects that were approved, we pushed. We were able to get the Daher Mall started. We pushed very hard to get Cabot to be able to start. Point Seraphin, all the piling has been completed for the hotel project in that location. And we were pushing very hard with Sabasha to get that project off the ground as well. So what does this report show? The report shows that the 12.5% or the 12.2% growth came on the back of 2 major sectors. One was tourism, and Dominique will deal in more detail with tourism, but let me say this. Tourism grew 66% in 2021. But we only recovered 50% of our land-based arrivals and 10% of our cruise ship arrivals. So it's a lot to celebrate, but there's still plenty of potential that's left on the table. And construction grew by 20%. But here's the telling number. The number is that government's revenue came back to where it was in 2019 and 2020. So I want you to imagine that with only 50% of our land-based arrivals, that government's revenue recovered to where it was in 2019 and 2020. And if you recall, that was a record year for tourism. How is that possible? Because United Workers' Party's plan to use construction to make up the shortfall in tourism revenue worked. Remarkable. Very successful. Now, if we compare that, and I know, and again, every country has its own nuances, but I know we're always very quick to compare St. Lucia to people. So if we compare St. Lucia to Barbados, which is also a very tourism-dependent country, their economy grew by 1.4%. And again, Dominique will provide you some comparative numbers between Barbados and St. Lucia from a tourism perspective. But to say to you, we completely outperformed Barbados when it came to those numbers. In fact, if I could just steal your thunder and just maybe use one number, Dominique, as a comparison. We obtained 157,000 U.S. arrivals in 2021 in St. Lucia. Barbados had 44,000. So we got 3 times as many U.S. arrivals from a country that normally has more U.S. arrivals than St. Lucia. So I think that really is a tribute to the plan that we had and the execution. Now, I want to say that the Labour Party has been getting away with murder. And I don't know what it is that people don't want to call them out on the many mistruths, lies that they have professed. So let's go through the first one. Most of you will recall that when the Labour Party got elected, within months, every single time that the Prime Minister was interviewed, he was crying, lamenting about how badly the economy was managed and what the state of affairs of the economy, and there was no money and how many bills that they were to pay, etc. So now we see, how can that be? How can it be that the revenue has recovered to where it was in 2019 and 2020? And I also want to say to you, $100 million more in revenue in that year than when we first came into government in 2015 and 2016. 100 million. And that's post-COVID. He also said it was impossible to fulfill the promises that the Labour Party made, that they were going to increase the threshold of taxable income to $4,000, how unfair it was that a $1.50 tax had been placed on them and they didn't feel that they were benefiting from the improvement in the roads. And here it is, 9 months later, they have not given back the $1.50 to the fishermen. In fact, what they have done is they've added $2. So this is a party that continues to say one thing and do something entirely different. So the reality is that the Labour Party cannot take any credit for what has been achieved here. They're the ones who said that we should never have opened up the borders of St. Lucia. And so if you had not opened up the borders, the recovery that we've seen in tourism in St. Lucia probably more similar to what we see in some of the other countries, and in fact probably even worse than what that was. The second thing that they said is that you can't eat roads. And they said the reason why that we were implementing the construction projects was for F, F, and F. And now we're seeing that the evidence doesn't suggest that. If in fact government revenues are up, and we can see that income tax collections in 2019 was 258 million. In 2020, with COVID, it dropped to 228 million. And this year, it recovered to 236 million. That went from 277 million in 2019 down to 168 million in 2020 and back up to 220 million this year. VAT on international trade was at $517 million in 2019. It went down to $398 million in 2020. And it's back to $477 million this year. So what it shows is that the impact of construction and the recovery that we saw in tourism allowed money to be spread throughout the length and breadth of our country to be able to help with the recovery. And the Labour Party cannot take 1 ounce of credit for any of this. In fact, I think that what many St. Lucians have to ask themselves is that the irresponsible and immoral behavior of the Labour Party, how much it has cost this country. How is it that roads that benefit every single St. Lucian, whether you are Labour, Flabo, Independent, whoever you are, roads benefit every single person in this country. You only have to go to Rodney Bay and ask yourself the question, what would be the logic for not finishing the road? Up to now, you cannot point to anything that was done wrong. Yet the road is there in a deplorable state in which people should be benefiting from an improved efficiency. Instead, people feel like they're in a war zone in the middle of our tourism capital of Rodney Bay. Tavern and Shock. These are projects that were not costing the government of St. Lucia 1 cent, was not contributing to the debt to GDP of our country. That we had private sector entities that were spending the money, pushing work that did two things: help with the economic stimulus of creating jobs, not only jobs of laborers, but people with trucks, people with equipment, all the financiers. HIA, instead of accepting the fact that inflation, supply chain issues has caused the cost of the project to go up, accept that, find the money and continue the project. You've allowed the project to stop. St. Jude's. St. Jude's can be explained in 30 seconds. The same government now have admitted that the building that is standing at St. Jude's, the new building, cost $100 million. A state-of-the-art building. A building that has now taken in a very critical concern of ours, which is mold. So the panels are a modern design to prevent mold from taking place. That building is 20% bigger than OKEU. $100 million. And it's going to estimate $40 million more to operationalize and finish the ground floor. And the ground floor will absorb 100 beds, which means the entire operation at the stadium could move over to the ground floor. And you have left with 100,000 square feet upstairs to grow into. And this idea, well, there's going to be construction. The only construction that would be taking place upstairs will be putting up drywall. And this is a normal practice in every major country in the world. When you build new hospitals, you build for room for growth. Now let's make the comparison. The old building that you see standing there, $140 million. So what the new building will cost to build and to operationalize is what they spent already just on the unfinished building. Their own estimates were that it'll cost $100 million to finish that building. Anybody with any common sense that sees the potential of the South, that you need tripling the size of the airport terminal, a new cruise ship terminal coming into the South, expansion of the hotel sector in the South, people moving to live in the South, that you're going to eventually to need a bigger hospital. And that is what the new St. Jude's took into consideration. And instead of playing petty politics and the blame game and understanding that we are in a crisis period, and moving immediately right now is important to continue to play the politics. Not putting first, putting politics first. We're seeing the roads. How could you not continue? All the funding was done. You've given back the funding. This is a government that said that when we had COVID and we arranged to give each person who was employed and who lost their job $500. What did they say? The $500 was an insult. And what they would do is give $1,500. Well, when we had the fifth wave and people lost their jobs, I didn't hear that the government gave 1 cent. And we now know that the revenue of government is back to where it was in 2019. So what's the excuse? What's the excuse? Now, the most egregious thing that this government is doing right now is deciding not to absorb the price increase in prices of gas and cooking gas. And we now know that they had the fiscal space to do it. In fact, when we were in government and revenues were 1/3 less than what they are today, $15 million a month less than what they are today, we absorbed it because we understood that when you increase those prices, they are passed along. They're passed along to households whose now bills for public transportation is going to go up. It's passed along because cooking gas is the main form that people use, particularly in lower income households, to cook. So cost of living for them is going to go up. You have a private sector now that's going to have to absorb those, and they're going to be under tremendous pressure to increase wages, and rightfully so. But the reality is many of those businesses are still recovering from the losses that they had. The lack of productivity, because when people went out for COVID for 2 weeks, okay, you had to pay their salary, but you weren't getting their performance. Now you're seeing the price of electricity going up, the cost of freight, the cost of inputs. How is it you're going to expect the private sector to be able to absorb it? And if they decide not to absorb it and pass it on to the consumer, there's two things that are going to happen. Consumption is going to go down, cost of living is going to go even higher, and more importantly, on our exports, we're going to become less competitive. So this simple report that we received today unveils the big lie that the Labour Party perpetuated on the people of St. Lucia and took advantage of a very emotional period in people's lives, because that's what COVID did. COVID created a tremendous amount of disruption in our daily lives, created tremendous amount of anxiety. And that's what the Labour Party took advantage of. And yet they still want to sit there 9 months later and blame everybody for the crisis that we had nothing to do. So the opposition is calling on the Labour Party to stop with the petty politics. Stop with all the excuses, because this now has unveiled the truth. You know, there's a saying that I said, the truth is what you believe it to be. So I want to follow up with that. The truth is what you believe it to be, but the facts never change. The facts never change. And the facts show that the policies of the United Workers' Party worked. And in fact, if this Labour Party understood what they inherited and trying to stop Cabot, stopping all the major projects that we've had, reversing many of the policies that we had in place, I know that St. Lucia would be that much further ahead. So again, I want to thank all of the civil servants that participated in helping us implement our policies. I particularly want to thank the Ministry of Finance for the outstanding job that they did and the performance that they did. I think many times they go unrecognized in that regard. So I thank you.
Thank you very much, political leader. And you know, political leader, I think one of the amazing things about public life is that it gives you the opportunity to define who you are. And so what we've seen of the current leadership of the Labour Party is visionless operation. And visionless because tourism was our #1 income earner. And when COVID hit, the United Workers' Party government sought to ensure that all systems were set to protect, secure, and ensure, you understand, the future of this industry in St. Lucia. But yet we were told, you understand, that we believe that only Alan Chasney would think that tourism would return, you understand, to what it was prior to COVID. And yes, we've seen St. Lucia benefiting, you understand, from that experience. Tourism has returned and it will continue because people are always looking for opportunities to explore, you understand, and to reach out and to achieve their potential. So in looking at those few words, you know, around the definition of the leadership of the St. Lucia Labour Party, I think our country is in deep doo-doo because there's a lot of work to be done. We have instilled the policies, we have developed the policies over the years, we've seen the results come through in this social and economic review as presented by, of course, the political leader of the party. And now we'll take a closer look at the numbers around tourism, you know, which was perhaps the best that we've recorded in the history of this country. I present to you the man who led the charge for that to happen, Honorable Dominic Fede.
Thank you very much, Madam of Ceremonies here today, Mrs. Fortuna Belrose. Good afternoon, good morning, to St. Lucians here and abroad. Good morning to our political leader, Honorable Alan Chasney, and other well-wishers of the United Workers' Party that is here today. Now, If you were listening to the St. Lucia Labour Party these past few months, you would have thought that the Treasury was empty and that the United Workers' Party was the worst economic managers of our economic affairs in this country. Well, the report has come out, a little document called the Social Economic Review, where it tables and it properly records the economic success. And it simply says a very simple thing, that the United Workers' Party has presided over a strong economic recovery in this country. So they can play politics, they can bluff, they can lie, and they can try to find excuses. But the construction industry recovering by 20% shows that it brought about significant relief to many of our construction workers and families who were laid off in other sectors. This report also showed that our revenue came back in a short piece of time. And I remember how difficult it is sitting in the cabinet and our Minister of Finance and then Prime Minister, now our leader of opposition and political leader, and how it was extremely difficult for us to go through and juggle expenses month after month. And this is while we had an increased cost of healthcare in this country. But this is what we were able to do in more difficult times. We were able to pay civil servants every single month. We did it. We were able to ensure that St. Lucia's good name among the international investors who buy our bonds and our treasury bills, that we never defaulted a single payment to them. That's what you call prudent economic management. When we demitted office in July, the Labour Party came in, and you would recall that one of the first things they did was they went to Parliament and they said that they would like to remove the power of the board of the National Economic Fund so that they could put their hands on the $42 million we left there for a sinking wet day fund. Now, all of this was possible. All of this, a government that presided over the most terrible economic crisis our country has seen since independence. In fact, they said that the global pandemic brought about the worst economic times since the Great Depression. And as a result of that, we were still able to open up the Owen King EU Hospital. We were still open to get Victoria Hospital going. We didn't promise people income support. 11,000 St. Lucians benefited from income support while we were there. So we can talk, we can play politics, but when the civil servants, when the technocrats put their report together, and when they crunch the numbers and they put the facts, it will show that St. Lucia today is the fastest growing economy in the entire OECS. And those are the facts. We have left this government a very solid foundation upon which to take this country forward. But all they try to do is to stop projects, is to disrupt the flow, is to say, well, they cannot give Alan Chasney the credit for programs that are definitely working in this country. This is very, very sad. We come here today at a time when St. Lucians are feeling the pinch of a very, very terrible and unprecedented inflation which is gripping this country. You go to the supermarkets and the prices are going up. You go to the pumps at the gas stations, and we know that today a gallon of gas is 50. The bus drivers are on the brink. They are saying that if they don't get the subsidies soon, that they are going to increase the bus fares on the people of St. Lucia. We look at our fishing villages, and we see that fishermen in Viewfort, in Grizzly, in Marigold, in all of these places are having to confront with these increased prices. All of this is happening while the salaries of the people still have not moved an inch, have not moved a needle. We came to the public, we took the time as a opposition party. The opposition is not politics. But this force policies that can help the government in trying to assist people in a very difficult time. I look at the 6 plan. The LPG at a £100 level. You can perhaps increase that price because it is the middle class and more wealthy high income earners that will use the £100 cylinder. But please, it would be unconscionable, it would be uncaring if you increase the prices on people who are using the £20 and the £22 cylinder. We believe that if a government says that they can do nothing about it when the revenue has increased by $140 million, then that government, in my view, is uncaring, and that government needs to be removed today. So the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance, came out and said that nothing can be done. He put his hands up. He said that this was an international problem. But I say to the Prime Minister that this is not true. I say to the Prime Minister that I fundamentally disagree with you. If you do not have a vision to run this country, then get out of the way and put people in who can run this organization. So what did he do? Because it was a United Workers' Party idea, he didn't do it. We also said that for $1 million a month, you can give support to 10,000 vulnerable households of $100 so that they can get support in their electricity bill. I go to see old friends that I represented in Ancillary and Roseau and Millet. And I go around this country and I go to the supermarkets. And people's electricity connection are being disconnected. And this government could have helped. Out of the new $140 million in revenue that you have received, you could have done something to assist those vulnerable families so that their electricity can stay connected. What's the point? What's the point of boasting that you give them laptops and there is no electricity in the house for them to connect the laptop or charge the laptops to? What's the point if you're giving them laptops and they cannot study at home because the electricity bills have been disconnected? This is why we are saying today that this government is out of touch with the issues affecting the people of St. Lucia. And so I will spend little time on tourism today. And I want to spend a lot of time talking about the issues that affect you, the people of St. Lucia. Now, I look at people in the retail sector. Up to recently, someone called me working at a very popular retail house. And her salary is $500 a month. $125 a week. And she's coming all the way from Roseau. $125 a week. Just imagine if that bus fare goes up. She takes a bus every day. And she would need to pay over $5 a day. On a weekly basis, she's paying $30. She can't afford lunch. Because if she buys lunch, it would mean that she doesn't have anything to take home to the children. And so the reason why we are fighting this government to ensure that they subsidize the bus drivers so that the transportation cost in this country can remain stable, it is because of people like this. It is because of vulnerable individuals like these who need our help. And we are making our voices heard today because these people are afraid to make their voices heard. And so today we want to sound our voices so that theirs can be heard, So the minister says he's going to crunch numbers and he's waiting on the CDB. The people in Roseau, the people in Dennery, the people in Grosley, they cannot wait on the CDB. They cannot wait on the CDB time. There is an urgency of now. We have to get these issues sorted out now so that the people of St. Lucia can be saved from the wrath of the inflation situation affecting the country. We see Massey publicly announcing and explaining that it is no fault of theirs that the prices are going up, and that the people of St. Lucia are going to have to carry that weight of increased prices in the market. What did he say in the Prime Minister? We are recommending to you that you take some money and give some subsidies to the farmers so that you can give them seeds, so you can give them fertilizers, and you can help them with some of the other inputs so that they can increase production in this country. But give them a secured market like we did in the middle of the pandemic, so that the farmers will be able to take this food that they're producing and help to supplement those families who can't afford food. I was looking at DBS Street Vibes. And the Street Vibes, there was a man who said he can't afford to buy meat. Imagine that. There are several people who are living today on the backyard kitchen garden, and there's no affordability of protein. This is how serious it has gone in this country. And what do? We can do nothing while we find contracts for all of our friends, while we remove the security guard contract from the arcade and give it to a party hack. I mean, come on. We have to find help for the people of St. Lucia. This is important. We need help now. And so it's not good enough to go to the parliament and huff and puff and focus on the petty issues while we have bigger problems affecting our people on a daily basis. A government that ran on a campaign to say they're going to put the people first. What they have done is that they have put themselves first. They have put themselves, their friends. Listen, now in Roseau, when we used to desil the drain, we would bring together the people of the community and we would make that contract available. You know what they are doing now? They are giving everything in the constituency of ancillary canneries to a man who was known to support the party. Now, I am not going to be the one to judge them in a few years' time for that. The people will judge them. History will judge them. They will be judged for their uncaring behavior. And the people of ancillary canneries will have a day, a redemption day will come soon. 5 years is not 50 years. So, the Prime Minister is going to speak at the budget tonight. And there you will hear that we mismanaged this country. There you will hear that we carried up the debt. But yet, he is on record as borrowing the most in his very first budget when he gets a chance to do something about this issue of high debt and high borrowing. What did he do? He chose instead to become the Prime Minister in history to borrow the most amount of money in the history of St. Lucia. And you want to tell me that these people have integrity? You want to tell me that these people are serious about what they are doing? He has no shame to come and tell the nation that he is going to spend the most money ever spent. The first opportunity he gets to come and lay some policies down. What do? Increase the budget? This can't work. This can't be the St. Lucia that we will accept. No way. Several promises have been made in the election campaign. They said that people would get their tax refunds. They said that they would have reduced the possibility of people paying taxes who made below $4,000. In fact, they said they would abolish you paying any taxes, so you would pay no taxes. What has happened to those promises in the budget? The fishermen are still waiting on the excise tax to be removed. The vendors in the arcade, and I'm so sorry for the vendor association president, who is coming under political attacks today because he's merely representing his vendors. A man who has had a long tradition of ensuring that he represents his people is now coming under the wrath of the Labour Party's attacks. Listen, I can take a lifetime of all of their scandals, all of their attack. I don't care. But the people of St. Lucia cannot take one more day of their failed policies. We must raise our collective voices to ensure that they do the right thing. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dominic. And when we speak visionless, you hear it in the presentation that Dominic made. You know, without a vision, a people perish. And so all these promises that were made to the people, all these promises to the poor man on the street, the $1,500, all of these are amounting to nothing. And the people are feeling it. You go to the supermarkets, you hear the cry. You go around the market, you hear the cry. And St. Lucians, all we can say to you is wake up. Wake up. The United Workers' Party laid a strong foundation for the success of the country today. Let us see in that presentation this afternoon of the budget what really is in there, you understand, for us to hold on to. I thank you for being here this morning. Thank you, political leader. Thank you, Honorable Fede, for being here. And of course, we'll bring back the political leader to deal with some other matters that are dear to all of us as citizens of this country.
Thank you. Before I do this part of the presentation, I certainly don't want to begrudge the media in being able to ask any questions. So if there's any questions that you have on the first part of our presentation, we'd be very happy to entertain them.
I have one. As was rightly said, the cost of living is increasing and salaries are not. And this is primarily the main problem, that people, with what they earn each month, they're not able to essentially take care of themselves and their families. Is it the time? Because subsequent governments in the past, including this one, has spoken about it. Just yesterday, the Labour Minister called for minimum wage. The Prime Minister has said that we don't need a minimum wage, but rather a livable wage. Do you think that this would be the best measure to help this whole situation instead of the 1,500 or probably subsidizing the gas prices? Because as the Prime Minister says, they cannot because they need the revenue. What a minimum wage or livable wage to help?
So it's very sad that maybe we all have not understood the complexity of this issue. So certainly when we came into office, we were absolutely looking at a minimum wage. The problem that we have in St. Lucia, and I hope everybody will bear me out on this, is that the discrepancy between the wages in the different sectors. So you have one particular sector, and which is the retail sector, in which wages are extremely low. But you have other sectors in which they are more competitive wages to be had. Now, when a country is suffering under 25% unemployment and you increase the minimum wage, potentially what you're going to do is cause those businesses to reduce the number of people that they're hiring. So the question becomes, from an economics perspective, do you attempt to try to raise the economic activity, bring it up so that all of a sudden now that you reduce the supply of of workers, and then you're going to see the prices go up. So it's exactly what we're seeing in the States. Fact is that even though the U.S. has a minimum wage, many people would have told you that it was too low relative to the cost of living in the United States. Now that you have a 3.2 or 3.3% unemployment, now the call for a $15 minimum wage is now becoming a reality. And many of the workers themselves are also, that's the big change in COVID, people have now said, I'm not willing to work for that price anymore. Now, those persons in those countries are able to do that because there is what we call a social net. There's unemployment insurance, there are subsidies and transfers to low-income households, that if a person doesn't want to work, that's where now that they have this option. And that's the difficulty that we have in St. Lucia. That's what we've been trying to change. When I spoke about our five for five, was putting in the hands of all St. Lucians an insurance card. So even if you are earning an income or no income at all, it was going to be paid for you. You didn't have to pay any extra money. So that was one less stress level. The idea of subsidizing people's electricity and water bills, the idea of providing people with food, all of a sudden now starts raising that minimum living standard for persons. The difficulty, and I want hopefully all of us to appreciate this, small island development states like St. Lucia rely very heavily on our export industry. So whether it's bananas, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's tourism, or whether it's our financial services. And when you increase the input cost in St. Lucia, in essence what you're doing is you're making those products more expensive. And making them more expensive makes us less competitive. And it's to try to find that balance. So certainly solving the unemployment problem in St. Lucia is critical to raising that standard. If you're going to speak about a minimum wage, it has to be what we spoke about was a sectorial minimum wage. And the analysis that we were doing was to say, okay, it's unfair. It's an unacceptable wage of $500. But the reality is government in a position to make up that $500. So if that person chooses not to work and not get the $500, what's the alternative? And that's the difficulty that we have. And so it's a complex situation. I don't envy any government trying to find a way to solve the problem. But United Workers' Party believed that it was a multifaceted approach, which included growing the economy. We continuously believe, and I say it all the time, St. Lucia is not even coming close to reaching its potential. So, I mean, the minister of the Prime Minister, you'll recall, hopefully I'm not inventing any of this stuff, when he was asked about tourism, what did he say? He didn't know that tourism was as impactful on our economy as it was. Here's a man who had been a 5-term parliamentarian, a deputy prime minister, was twice a minister of tourism, right? And he didn't know. And so the reality is you must have a sensitivity towards the economy. And this is why what Dominique was focusing on, and rightfully so, is the pain that people are feeling now. So the $500 now, and that's what Dominique was saying, has become worse. It's become worse because now there is an electricity surcharge cost that's gone up. The cost of food is going up. So you have two choices. You can buy the same amount of food you were getting before and pay a higher price, or reduce the amount of food that you were getting, or reduce the amount and the quality of food. So whereas it maybe you could get a little piece of fish or some sardines or some tuna, whatever, now you can't get any. So there's no protein in your you have to become like some of the Rastas and get your protein from plant-based protein. But a lot of people are not educated enough, sadly, or aware enough as to the virtues of plant-based foods. So here it is, the $500 has become worse. And that's why we said in our 6-point plan, this is not the time to allow the price of the gas to go up by $2 in the last month. $2. And now we're going to see the increase in bus fares in May. And that is going to have a carry-on effect because now all the businesses that are producing products, their price is going to go up because now the businesses, the person who's getting the $500 and is coming from Roseau, that company may have to now at this point subsidize that cost. Their electricity cost has gone up. All the openings and closings during COVID, that costs money. Many businesses took advantage of the moratorium. Now that the moratorium is ended, okay, you have to not only make up what you have to pay, what you owed before, but you have to make up for what you didn't pay. The cost of a container is almost doubled in price to bring products in, and freight. So the entire economy is being attacked. And I always liken it to this. If you are in a dark room and you have to make it through the room, do you run? You have to go cautiously. Right now, let's take advantage of the gains that we've had. Let's understand that we don't know what's going to happen with tourism. I can say to you right now, without fear of contradiction, that the summer and the fall are not going to be kind to St. Lucia. Because the number of airline seats that we had negotiated have been cut. So even if you were to go out today and increase your marketing, which they are not doing, how do you fulfill the demand? Because the people can't get here. JetBlue Airlines last week announced that they're going to cut capacity globally by 10%. Not because there's not demand. They can't get enough staff. You have supply chain issues. You have now the cost of fuel. You have increased demand. And so therefore, a destination like St. Lucia, which is much further away and is not spending the money marketing to generate the demand for St. Lucia, we're going to be in trouble. So I want to say that United Workers' Party has always understood that if you're going to put people first, you must put your country first. That's right. Because if your country does not have the resources to provide the transfer pricing and to create a social net, and that's what we were saying. We wanted to reduce the VAT rate, remember, from 12.5% to 10%. But the only way you can do that is by creating a social net so that we can directly support the people that need it. When you're subsidizing rice, flour, and sugar for everyone, so the hotels are benefiting from it, high-income people, even Martinicans are coming over to St. Lucia to buy our rice, flour, and sugar because it's so much cheaper than what it is in Martinique. You have to change that structure to provide health care, provide education, and provide a minimum standard of living for persons. The minimum wage in itself, in isolation of everything else, is not going to be effective.
So my question would be, it's actually a lead-up question to what you're going to be talking about. In the draft case, there was a whole issue about speaking time slots, and obviously the appropriation bill is going to be debated on Thursday. We want to know what has the discussions been like with the leader of government. Has an amicable solution been arrived at speaking order for this one?
There has been an exchange of letters, which I'm very grateful for, because at least once it's written, it can't be misinterpreted. In my letter back to the leader of the opposition, hopefully I provided a more clear explanation. The responsibility of the opposition, of which there are two of us, is not only to respond to the Prime Minister or Minister of Finance's policy, right? We must also respond to each of the individual ministers. Now, to rebut a minister, you must first hear him. So the idea would be is that we're now, because we're only two in the House, it means that each of us are going to have to rebut not only the Prime Minister's policy statement, but 7 ministers. Right? So what we've recommended is that we speak in slots 8, so there will be 7 persons who would have spoken, 1 person will speak, and then we speak in slot 15, where we hear the other ministers. Look, the privilege is of the government to close the debate. So the Prime Minister gets to rebut all of these issues. I think that we would be doing the greatest disservice to the persons that we represent if we're not given the opportunity to hear. So the idea of continuously saying that it is procedure or protocol or convention that an opposition leader responds immediately after is not true. If you go back to Hansard, it's available to everybody in public. Several leaders of the opposition always spoke last. And I'm sure they spoke last for the exact same reason. You have to hear. Now, the last session with the estimates is an embarrassment and an insult to the people of St. Lucia. The leader of the opposition does not have the chance of closing the debate. So how can you tell me that almost a whole day to go, because we were only Thursday at 3 o'clock, so you had the whole rest of Thursday and you had the whole day of Friday, there were 5 senior ministers who had not spoken on the other side, representing 50% of the budget. And you chose to close the budget at that time, and you want to blame anybody else but yourselves? You have a responsibility, in my mind, to be accountable to the people of this country and report to the people. What the opposition says or does is irrelevant. And so certainly I'm hoping that we can agree on the schedule. In the absence of agreeing on the schedule, then we'll revert back to what is in the standing orders, which is whoever catches the eye of the speaker. And I'm happy to live with that. I think it would be not productive, but if that's the way we're going to go, because this is not about Alan Chasney. I keep on saying this. This is not about us or me or Dominic. This is about the people of St. Lucia, and we have a responsibility to provide a fair and balanced rebuttal of whatever is being proposed. But if you can't hear it, then I can't rebut it. But if it appears to me that the government is more interested in one-upmanship. You know, that they can come and speak after me and then say whatever they want to say, and I have to sit there and just listen. I can't respond, I cannot rebut. So if things that are being said that are not true or need further explanation, i.e. as St. Jude's. I mean, let's take Ojo Labs. They keep on saying, well, you all left a bill for $1 million. I'm so tired of the half-truth. Where did the $1 million come from? When we came into government, there was a program called NICE, in which people were being paid $1,500. And the vast majority of people being paid $1,500 were working in the public sector, and were hired in the public sector circumventing the Public Service Commission. So many civil servants found people working next to them getting actually paid more money, that they didn't have to go through any interviews and were being appointed in ministry. And when the contract came to an end, which it did, so there's always this thing that we fired people. No, we didn't fire anybody. Contract came to an end because it was a 3-year contract. Okay? The question is, were they in a position to get a job? The public service is not hiring people. So what we did is we created a program called NAP, National Apprenticeship Program. And so when we met with Ojo, we wanted to convince and get Ojo to be able to open up a facility in the South, because nobody was operating in the South. All the call centers were in the North. So in order to incentivize them to open up in the South, Invest St. Lucia agreed that they would build the space out for them and rent it back to them, so they didn't have to put the capital cost out for the building. And secondly, the government of St. Lucia, through our NAP program, said, on your first 400 employees, for the first 6 months, each person, the government will contribute $1,000 towards their salary. And for the next year, government will contribute $500 a month. Now, the persons at Ojo, the minimum wage that they were getting was $3,500. So that means in the first 6 months, the company was paying $2,500 and the government paid $1,000. For the next year, the company paid $3,000 and the government paid $500. So the $1 million was money that was due to the company because they paid the $3,500. But the way they say it is if something untoward was done, something unhanded, where we gave money to Ojo, it is to the workers of St. Lucia. Young people for the first time, who could work in the South and be at their home in 20 minutes. Who could stay in their own home with their parents and not have to pay rent, not have to go back and forth 3 hours a day in commuting to their jobs. I think it was worth that. So, St. Lucia, like the rest of the world, I don't want to isolate St. Lucia. We're all facing the same problem. I don't think there's a person alive that can tell you with any kind of a certainty as to what's going to happen. So it's to create stability. Part of that stability, you should have never allowed the price of fuel to go up. You should have continued to subsidize the price of the cooking gas. And in my humble opinion, as Dominic said, we created a six-point plan. Help your farmers and go back to the electricity subsidy. At minimum, allow people to stay alive, right? In the hopes now that the economic activity programs that you're supposed to be doing can continue to create jobs for people and that there are paying jobs that are not burdening the state. Okay? Any other questions? No? So I just want to bring up an issue because it's a very big concern of mine, of some of the mistruths that continue to be thrown out there. And I have to say, and I hope that the media will take this in the greatest way, this is being a positive criticism, that whether it's me as a political leader or former as a prime minister or any politician or any state official, is to do your research. Ernest Hilaire spoke specifically in response about the case against him with what we call Rovergate. And he continues to try to minimize what he did, as almost clouding it into what he simply asked was for the High Commission's office to facilitate the purchase of his car. Right? Now, the Marcus Nicholas case creates a very interesting comparison for us. So Marcus Nicholas was accused and charged and found guilty of forging a document and presenting that document to Inland Revenue, dealing with his tax returns. In the case of Ernest Hilaire, he did it 4 times. So the first car that Ernest purchased, he purchased in his name using letterhead from the St. Lucia High Commission office, in which he said to the British he wanted to get the car duty-free because he was the High Commissioner, which he was entitled to. But when he wrote that letter, Ernest knew that the car that he was getting the tax relief on belonged to his brother. His brother paid for the car. So using Ernest's own term, his brother was the beneficial owner of the car. So that's the first lie. The second time was that Ernest, now trying to purchase a car for himself and realizing that because he'd already used his concession, he was not entitled to get the car duty-free, he attempted to purchase the car in the name of Tafawa Williams, who was an employee at the state. Now, the document I'm going to read for you is a document that's a public document, because there's been several cases of defamation and now most recently the judicial review in which all of these documents have been filed in the court, and this is where I'm saying the research, it's available to all of the media. So this is a very important document. So this is a document that was written on September 1st of 2015. And there's a lady called Linda Hamilton, who was the PA, the personal assistant of Ernest Hilaire. And this is a note exchanged between Linda Hamilton and the Foreign Office in the UK. So when you're applying for concessions as a High Commission, you have to go through the British office. And the letter says, and this same letter had been copied to Ernest Hilaire, so it means Ernest was familiar with what was written. It says, "Dear Linda, further to your telephone conversation with my colleague Alexander Cook, I understand that there has been a misunderstanding concerning the marital status of Mr. Tafawa Robert Williams. In order for me to amend the record of our database, I should be grateful if you would please resubmit an amended change of circumstances TX9 form together with a photocopy of the vignette from Miss Williams' passport." So apparently they realized that they could not have gotten the car in the name of Tafawa. They attempted to maybe get it in the name of his wife, but the wife was not registered. So it goes on. It says, "I also understand that there was a misunderstanding regarding the application for a new duty-free vehicle, that the vehicle is an official embassy fleet vehicle rather than a new duty-free vehicle purchased by Mr. Williams. So there's no confusion here. It then goes on to say, to avoid any confusion, please put High Commission of St. Lucia in the box marked purchaser's name, and in the purchaser's address in the UK, put the mission's address. And when you go down and you see the TX26 application, owner's name, St. Lucia High Commission. The address, the 1 Collington Gardens, London. And then when you see the invoice originally was in Tafao Williams' name, became now in the High Commission's name. So, like the first car, where he lied and used his position as the High Commissioner to lie to the government of the UK to say that the car belonged to him, when in fact the car belonged to his brother. He then lied again because he said on St. Lucia High Commission letterhead that the car belonged to Tafao Williams. He lied because he knew the car did not belong to Tafao Williams. He then lied again because when he put the car in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission, did he seek permission from anyone to do it? The answer is no. He didn't. He used his office as the High Commission and lied to the British government again, because he said to the British government, this car belongs to the St. Lucia High Commission. But the problem was, by registering the car in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission, by putting the invoice in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission, and saying that it belonged to the St. Lucia High Commission, even though the government of St. Lucia did not know, legally, the car became the asset of the St. Lucia High Commission and the government of St. Lucia. Now, here is the issue. The car coming into St. Lucia. So the question is, when he gave a declaration that said that the car belonged to him in St. Lucia, and 5 years, 6 years has gone by, and he's not been able to provide any evidence that's needed to show that he owns the car. Because the car invoice is in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission, the car was registered in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission, and there's no document that he's received that gives him the permission to have registered it in the High Commission's name and also to deregister it back into his name. Now here's where people, and I get it, I understand because it's a confusing issue as to where people get confused. And Ernest uses this example he did on the Hot 7 show. And he said that this is no different than a friend of mine buying a TV for me and bringing it down. Okay? Custom, well, I'm not even going to go there. And Customs doesn't ask who the owner of the TV is. Of course not. Because Customs is only interested in collecting the revenue. So if a friend of mine buys a TV for me and it comes down, as long as it pays its duty, Customs doesn't care. And here's now where the difference comes in. The reason why Customs needs to know who the owner of the vehicle is because the vehicle is coming into St. Lucia. One, that the Foreign Office paid for the freight. Two, that the Foreign Office would pay the VAT. And three, that it would be duty-free. On the basis of what? On the basis that he is a returning national. That is a cabinet conclusion. Cabinet conclusion says any returning national, the car will be duty-free, Ministry of Foreign Affairs will pay the freight, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will pay the VAT. Perfect. But there's a second condition to that. The second condition is that the car must be owned by him. Because the benefit of the incentive only applies to him because he is the returning ambassador. And this is where Ernest is playing all of us for a fool. For 5 years, perpetuating a massive lie in which we are scared as a community to call him out on it. And because of that, he is now impugned the name of the Attorney General's office. He's impugned the name of Customs of St. Lucia. He's impugned the name of the Prime Minister's office. And he's impugned all of our names. So it was worse, it was bad enough in where he did this, and we now see that Marcus Nicholas was found guilty and is going to jail. For those many St. Lucians who keep on saying, oh, just get him to say, I'm sorry. No, it was an abuse of his privilege because Marcus did what he did in his private capacity and the judge still called him out on it. Ernest did this when he was the High Commissioner of St. Lucia. This is wrong. And the reality is now the government is participating in a massive cover-up. Because again, people seem to be confused by what the case was about. The case was never about making any allegations against Ernest Hilaire. The case simply was asking him and to enforce the request of customs for him to provide the documentation to show he owned the car. That's all. So when you say there's going to be mediation on what? Provide the information. And the information doesn't have to be the invoice. The information can be an instrument that says he had permission from the state to register the car in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission. But you see, everything becomes politicized. I have no personal issues with Ernest Hilaire. I have no emotion. What I have issues with is the democracy and the reputation of my country. And I will fight. I want to be held accountable, but I want everybody else also to be held equally accountable. And particularly, as the judge said, persons who are in the public life and who've been given extra privileges and discretionary powers, they are going to be held to a higher standard. Now, the second thing that Ernest spoke about is about the investigators going up to the UK. As if the investigators went up there to deal with his car. No. The Auditor General provided a report, public, in which it was found out that Ernest opened up a joint account with the then Ambassador Jufali. So the account was in the name of the St. Lucia High Commission, Ernest Hilaire as a signatory, and the Ambassador Jufali as a signature. Wow. Ambassador to the IMO. Whoa. And £66,500 was transferred in that account from Mr. Jufali. And monies were transferred from that account into Ernest Hilaire's personal account. Wow. That's what the investigation is about. And why would they not be an investigation? Because Ernest Hilaire presided over, wait a second, let me just say this again, that no permission, according that's required by the Financial Act, no permission was requested to open up the account. No permission was given to open up the account. No notice had been sent to the Ministry of Finance that £66,500 was sent into the account. No permission was requested of the Ministry of Finance to spend the money. So in essence, it acted like a slush fund. That's public information. Wow. We don't want to hear. Nobody wants to bring it up. This is not about Ernest. This is about our institutions. This is about our laws, people. In other countries around the world, governments fall for this reason. Look what has taken place in the UK over what? Partygate. We're talking about not one, multiple examples of immoral and illegal behavior. And now what has happened is the government of St. Lucia today is participating in a cover-up. And the reality is it has to change. And so when I sit and I listen to Ernest get on and try to make it out and deflect, Dolphin Park, $1 million for Ojo, and this and that, all of which have been answered. What did my government do wrong with the Dolphin Park? Made a request of national trust as to whether we should do it or not? That all of a sudden becomes something that is so egregious? Cabot, when he says that we gave Cabot more concessions, tell me what they were. There's a law. There's an act. Can't give them anything more than what they've required. That's right. And the reality is that this government is playing against St. Lucians for fools. How can you tell me that you have revoked the Queen's Chain and yet the project is still under construction? How? One minister says that Marjorie's not going to move, another minister shows up and accepting a check for $1 million in order for Marjorie to move. But the reality is if you start lying at this level on those basic things, is this a government that we can trust? And I can say to you, without fear of contradiction, that this government is morally corrupt and is grossly inefficient. And given what we have to face in the world today, I do not believe they are equipped to put anybody first except themselves. When I see some people who are out there making all kinds of moral charges against me, and today would find themselves owning a bar at Castries City Council. Whoa. The same people. And yet there was a plan for what was supposed to take place to benefit whom? The vendors. When we started the redevelopment of Castries Market, I didn't start with the front, we started with the back, where the little people are, and raising their levels. I ask anybody, go and see the bathrooms. Go and see what we put in, and the continuation to make that the heartbeat of Castries. 9 months you're in office, nothing has started. Just talk, blame, blame, blame. The Social and Economic Review reveals the big lie. And the day is coming when solutions now are going to have to show and understand and appreciate they were fooled. And therefore, an ill-gotten good is no good. Right? And like many times when you buy something that you at a store and it was promised to do something and it doesn't work, what do? You return it. That day is coming. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions that you have. Okay. And I'm certainly willing to, if you can't find the documents in the at the courts, I'm certainly willing to make those documents, which are stamped by the court, so you know that it's official, make those documents available to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much all, and I'll leave you with just one thought. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And this country, under the leadership of Sir John, we, the children of Sir John, were taught that integrity in public life is key. I leave you with the thought, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Thank you very much for being here, and good morning.